A majority of farmers actually supported the farm legislations and now withdrawn, says a member of the Supreme Court appointed panels on the legislation, raising the question, will a victorious BJP bring these laws back? I'm Barkha Dutt here with the Mojo story. Here's what we know on this very, very intriguing set of developments so far. Anil Ghanwat of the Supreme Court appointed panel on the farmers' protest and the farm law says that 86% of farmers had actually expressed their support for the new legislations. He says more than 60 stakeholders that came before the panel said that they were in favor of the changes and that it was unfair to the silent majority to have had the laws repealed. Remember that the report of the panel was lying in a sealed envelope and Mr. Ghanwat decided to go public with it. The farmers' unions are saying that things are not so simple. In fact, pointing out that 40 groups that were at the helm of the protest did not even appear before the panel. But the fact is that the debate is raging on as to whether the farmers' protest was even a factor or not in the recently concluded assembly elections. In Punjab, the farmers' parties were wiped out. And in Uttar Pradesh, there was some localized consequence in West UP, but of course not overall in the state. Let's introduce our guests on the program today. We have Sandip Ghosh, commentator and columnist with us. We're joined by Smita Gupta, veteran journalist. And we're also joined by Avik Saha, who is the face of the farmers' protest for so long at the height of the protest. Anil Ghanwat was with us, but his line has just gone down, and I'm sure he'll be able to reconnect in the course of the program. Let me get early responses from you, Avik, if I may. We know that the farmers' unions have responded by saying that many of those who were at the helm of the protest did not even appear before this Supreme Court panel. So when the panel says 86% farmers supported the laws, that may not be absolutely correct, but that begs the question, why didn't they appear before the Supreme Court panel? And what do you make of this claim that a majority of farmers are in fact in support of the farm legislations?
The farmers' unions did not appear before this panel because the farmers' unions clearly understood that making laws is a policy issue which is the prerogative of the government. And to withdraw the laws, it would again be the prerogative of the government. The Supreme Court, time and again, has said that, look, we cannot get into policy. So the farmers did not go to the Supreme Court ever because they understood it's a matter of policy. The Supreme Court had intervened on the limited question of blockage of the roads, and in the passing said, "Why don't you talk to the farmers' unions and find out what's their problem?" I'm afraid this committee has done much more than that, much more than the Supreme Court asked, but that's another issue. Primarily, this was not a legal issue. This was a policy issue. The farmers understood that and agitated and engaged with the policy makers, not the courts of law. This is why this committee's report has to be understood in your debate today in light of that.
Okay, and we'll get deeper into it a week. But of course, the data also tells you that the farmers' parties, as they were called in Punjab, the Rajewal group, were wiped out. Whatever anger voters felt with the establishment was transferred to the Aam Aadmi Party. In Uttar Pradesh, there were pockets, Muzaffarnagar, Shamli, Baghpat, where the anger was displayed. The BJP did suffer setbacks, but overall it didn't suffer any setbacks. How do you understand the election results if the farmers' anger was such a big issue?
Uh, the primary issue in the majority of Uttar Pradesh was minimum support price, which was not resolved during the protests. So the farmers of Uttar Pradesh who had never seen MSP, particularly central and eastern Uttar Pradesh, who had never seen MSP, uh, were curious to know what would happen, and the protest did not reach that point of resolution where a law on MSP could have been made. So, well, locally, they must have felt that the existing government is a better option than the government than the challenger. And these are local situations. But I assure you of one thing, that the issue of the farmers continues to remain burning bright because it is about income security, in fact, security of life and livelihood. And how can that issue just go away?
Okay, we'll get more into the fact that the farmers groups are talking about restarting the protest movement. But Sandeep, let me bring you in now. Yogendra Yadav has made many public statements. He's another key leader of the farmers protest movement, saying that the farmers prepared the wicked, they prepared the witch. It was the opposition's job to actually bowl better than they did. This is on record on multiple platforms. Here is my question to you. Before you answer, if we bring up the Lok Niti CSDS surveys, they actually tell you that both in Punjab and in Uttar Pradesh, there was actually a significant amount of support. In Punjab, more than 80%. In UP, also close to 50% for the farmers' protest movement. And in fact, the Lokniti survey shows you that 46% of people actually approved when the Prime Minister took back the legislations. So it's one thing to say that this sentiment could not be translated into votes for the opposition. It's another thing to say that the farmers movement did not have popular support. The surveys, the post poll surveys did show you that it did. So is Yogendra Yadav wrong? Sandeep Ghosh.
See, Barkha, the first point is if you look at the report, is the report talking only about UP and Punjab? It is talking on a national scale. Was the farm laws passed only for UP and Punjab? No, it was for a national policy decision, and in which whatever may have been the brief or mandate of the committee, they are saying 86% of farmers nationally did not support this. And that's something which people like me had always been harping upon throughout the protest, that it is essentially, it's 1.5 states, or you may say 2.25 states, who were really, even if you were to assume that all of them were against it, that was the maximum people who were holding the country to ransom and holding the capital region to ransom by doing so. So Avik talks about the policy matters. The farmers' protest for a lot of us was purely a political issue.
Why do
And
you think? Why do you think the Prime Minister, whom you have always said you support as opposed to not supporting the BJP on all issues, why do you think the Prime Minister withdrew the legislations?
Prime Minister withdrew also, if you recall his speech, he was very specific to say there was overwhelming support except for a small minority of farmers. And he talked about, his inability. He said, "Hamara niyat mein kuch kami reh gayi, hamara, we were not successful in convincing them, and that's why we are withdrawing, because even if it's a minuscule minority, we don't want to steamroll over them." But my personal own reading, apart from that, there were other political elements which probably prompted the Prime Minister and the government. It was not. See, if it was just elections, BJP would not have been so worried about what's happening in Punjab. It would have. It knew it didn't have a presence there, so it would not have been worried about its 4 seats becoming 0 seats. They were expecting a much more volatile or explosive situation in Punjab. It was those considerations and security considerations, to my mind, which we are not privy to. That's what made the Prime Minister withdraw it. And the last point, when you're talking about Lokniti CSDS, as has been seen, even in the other pre-poll surveys, the people have expressed dissatisfaction on a whole lot of issues, but still they have gone ahead and voted for BJP. And
I just want to say, this is post-poll.
The last point, we
Sandeep,
made
this
so
is a
much of an issue about
post-poll survey. Just want to correct you. It's a post-poll survey.
Okay, even if it's post-poll survey, but there was that even on other issues like which you have talked about, unemployment, inflation, is those things didn't go away. But these people still voted for BJP. Everybody ran with, to our this place north of Sitapur or Lakhimpur Kheri. But what happened in Lakhimpur Kheri constituency? Forget his position, but the constituency has voted hugely in their favor. How has the Aam Aadmi Party scored in the Terai? If those are the areas which were really affected by the farmers' protest. So there is a huge disconnect. And the problem is we are trying to conflate the farmers' issue into a bigger thing. And so Mr. Yadav, I suppose, was pretty frank in saying he was preparing the pitch for fast bowlers to bowl out BJP. I admire his honesty.
I'll take that back to Avik in a moment. But Smita, how difficult is it going to be now for the farmers' movement to get the kind of energy that it got previously? Actually, if the BJP wanted, in the light of this report, the BJP could reconsider or bring back these legislations or leave it to the states. So, I mean, anything could happen in this mix. What do you see happening politically now, Smita?
I don't know. It's very difficult to gauge what this government will do, but I doubt whether it will bring back the laws because, as far as I'm concerned, this panel was from day one fixed. I mean, there were four members named to the committee, and the opinions of three people were already known. They were pro the farm laws, and the fourth person, Bhupinder Singh Maan of the BKU, didn't agree to be on that committee. So I don't really buy the findings of this committee. Secondly, it itself says that of the 266 organizations, only 73 showed up. And clearly, almost nobody from UP was represented. So the government knows very well that this is the protest could, backfire on it, because it is true that the BJP eventually won Uttar Pradesh, but on the ground they had to work very, very hard to counter that. For instance, I will give you two instances. One, there was Rakesh Tikayat's right hand man was a man called Raju Elawad Bhaisi, who I met during this election. This was a person who organized the Mahapanchayat in September 21. He organized the Bharat Bandh in the same month, later that month. He was busy doing Hindu-Muslim unity. This man, in October, he just went off to Lucknow and joined the BJP. So I asked him when I met him, I said that how is it that you were such a key part of this agitation? How is it that you joined the BJP? So he gave me some excuses. He said, well, actually the farm laws, they only apply to Punjab and Haryana. In UP, the core issue is MSP. And nobody seemed to understand that. So I had to leave. And then, of the political choices available, the BJP seemed to me to be the best. But the fact is that Mr. Elawat was a very influential man in that region. He was a general secretary for the BKU across 3 divisions of Western UP.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the kind of, when he walked across, what kind of change it made. And this man, who had been organizing Mahapanchayats to foster Hindu-Muslim unity, sat in front of me and abused Muslims. So, you can see, it's all part of that larger BJP game. Secondly, I went to Bijnor, which also has a lot of Jat farmers. Over there, the picture was very, very different. Over there were a lot of, local panchayats were actually, during the elections, were still talking about farmers' issues. And it was in several places that I visited, the farmers, and they were not just the Jats, but other farmers from other communities who had taken part in the protest, had come all the way up to the Delhi border. They also talked about it. See, farming issues, let us forget the farm laws. Agriculture is in distress. If you take the larger question of unemployment, you talk to young men, nobody who's a farmer's son simply does not want to be a farmer. He wants a government job because agriculture, the way it is run in this country, can no longer sustain. So I am pretty sure that the government is well aware of all this. It has no answers clearly, or it is more committed, as a lot of farmers over there.
Yeah.
told me.
Let me just jump in. Let me just jump in and bring this to Avik now. Do you think, Avik, looking back, it was a mistake to get politics in the mix? You all started by saying that you had nothing to do with politics, but by the end of it, you had opposition leaders clearly identifying with your movement. Or do you feel that the movement would not have become what it did without the support of opposition politicians?
Barkha, this needs to be de-obfuscated. The farmers' movement had 2 principal demands: repeal the laws, which was a demand raised from Punjab, Haryana, and states where MSP procurement takes place. And the second was make an MSP law so that states where MSP procurement does not take place, that starts. UP, excepting Western UP, The rest of UP is affected by that demand for MSP. At the end of the protest, Mr. Modi agreed only to repeal the three laws. And he said, I will make a committee for your MSP demand and we will look into it. This is the actual issue. So, one of the reasons that may have played in the mind of the UP voter is all right, there will be a committee, there might be a law. I don't know. But that is the demand that remains outstanding and pending. And it looks now that the government is not interested in meeting that demand.
And therefore, what options does that leave you?
Hence the new announcement for protests. Hence the new announcement for protests. And electorally, we were very clear that BJP is anti-farmer. So please ensure that BJP loses. Nowhere, no farmer leader has campaigned for any party and will continue not to campaign for any party. It's one thing to tell the farmer voter who your enemy is. It's quite another to say that please go and vote for so and so and so. We haven't done that and we won't do that.
Okay, let me bring Sandip on that. I think the Samyukt Kisan Morcha is making no bones about the fact that they called for an anti-BJP vote. To that extent, of course, the answer would be that call did not necessarily succeed. In Punjab, you could argue that it compelled every party to actually stand with the farmers. It led to the Akalis leaving the BJP. We forget all of this now. And in UP, at least in 4 districts rather, Muzaffarnagar, Shamli, Baghpat, Meerut, the BJP did take a knock, Sandip. But that was the extent of the impact in UP. And you heard what Avik said. They're remobilizing now.
No, they can remobilize, and that's a different issue. I'll come to that. First of all, 2 things very clearly. I am not in support of looking at the Punjab and UP elections as a referendum on the farmer protests, one way or the other. I will not say that because BJP has won, the farmers' protest has been negated or debunked because of that, and vice versa. It's very different from there. And so the point which the committee report says, that I think is much more substantive rather than for us to hang the coat on the election results, whichever way it went. Just because, as you're saying, some places it took a knocking, you cannot extrapolate it to the whole of the country. For that matter, the entire area where it was happening. So let's leave that aside.
But what should that mean? But what should that mean for the choices before the government? Unfortunately, Anil Ghanwat, who was right here with us, we're not able to get his connection to work. But what does this mean?
Yeah. Second point which Smita said, I again agree with her that the agriculture or farming is in distress in this country, and a lot of people like me, and I'm no expert, but the experts who had supported the farm reforms said that this is one way to help the farmers get out of it. Like Punjab, everybody talks about how Punjab is being converted into a desert by producing wheat and rice and consuming water which the country doesn't need. Instead, if they get into more lucrative crops, it would be doing much better for the state. Instead, because of the large farmers, they are so happy with the MSP and the Aradhya is making money. They want them to stick to producing wheat and rice, irrespective of whether the country wants it, and thereby depleting, groundwater and the rest of it. So those are issues. So there is I think there is nobody has a debate that farming or agriculture is not in distress. And rightly or wrongly, this was one of the solutions. People may disagree with the government. This is what they thought is one way forward to address that. So that is the point as far as I'm concerned. Now, I've told you earlier, I think the government withdrawing it, that remains valid. And therefore, I don't think the government would also, based on this report, decide tomorrow to reintroduce the farm laws in Parliament. I very much doubt if that will happen. They have promised the process of reevaluating and a new set of dialogue. I think they will go through that process. The last bit where I differ with Smita, irrespective of the what views these people have, we cannot question the process. That process, whether just because of their preset views, they actually didn't go through evaluating and they just superimpose their own views on the committee. that is something I think is a very drastic statement, and that is something the Supreme Court should take note of. If they think the committee has not done its job, check out the report. But we cannot come to a judgment that this report was always expected because these people.
Sorry. No, I just wanted Smita to respond to that, then I'll give Avik the last word. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to connect to Mr. Ghanwat, who actually released this report and made it public. Otherwise, we would have put some of these questions to him. Smita, if you want to come in on that to call a Supreme Court appointed panel prefixed, Sandip objects to that. But more importantly, looking ahead, Avik has said the farmers are going to start their protests again. This time, will they have as much muscle as they did the first time around?
To answer Sandeep's question first, I am just going by the facts on the ground. I mean, there were 4 committee members. Everybody knew the views of all 4. 3 were on one side, 1 was on the other side. The 4th person doesn't join the committee. I mean, that I don't want to say anything, repeat anything more on that. So I'm just going by the facts of the case.
Sure. Okay.
The second part, whether the farmers' protest can build up the same kind of thing, it's very hard to say, but I can tell you that regardless of who people voted for in the areas that I visited, I mean, agriculture was a huge issue, I mean, and that came up constantly. So I don't know whether these people will have the energy to go back from UP, whether the people from Punjab and will have the energy to go back. Because the protest that we saw was historic. Let's face it, it was really historic and of a really, it went on for so many months. And the kind of steel and determination that the farmers showed was, exemplary. I mean, this is the stuff for which historic movements are made. So I really wouldn't be able to guess.
Yeah.
So all I say is there are enough issues for farmers to go on protest again.
So let me put that to Avik. Avik, you reminded us as we started this show that you are in fact a UAPA accused, and one of at least 2 score people who are still facing charges under an anti-terror law. Those charges have not yet been dropped. It was one of the key demands of the protest movement. But realistically speaking, there must be some sense of feeling demoralized given the electoral verdicts. You've clearly said that you gave a call for an anti-BJP vote. Whatever sentiment there may have been in support of the farmers, that call was not heeded by the voter. Not even in Lakhimpur Kheri, where a ghastly sort of crushing of death to farmers happened by the junior home minister's son. Allegedly, I should add. Yes.
Yes, it is disappointing, but people are never wrong. We must have made a mistake in our communication, in our articulation. People know instinctively what they ought to do. And I think that is the fulcrum of democracy. Whoever challenges that is wrong, doesn't understand democracy. On the farmers' issues and the potential, as one of the people who gave the call for Delhi Chalo in November 2020, believe me, I was expecting 30,000 people. I was expecting a 2-day protest. I was talking to the Gurdwaras to arrange for langar for 2 days. Look what happened. So, how the protest will manifest itself, nobody knows, including those who plan it, organize it, give the calls. What is very clear to me is that 28th February was a historic day. That day, Mr. Modi's promise to double farmers' income came to an end. He gave it 6 years ago. And Mr. Modi has fallen silent on it. And believe me, with the rising inflation, the pain is so hard in the countryside that Mr. Modi is providing all the ingredients for the protests to, build up and bloom this time. And 100% of the farmers in this country, irrespective of what Sandip thinks and feels, want an assurance of income, just like every Indian who is in any occupation, job, or whatever. And that is the key issue that will never be addressed by Modi.
The minimum support price is never going to be a non-issue for any government and for any party, and it would be interesting to see how the BJP responds, especially in the light of this report, which is not being accepted by the Kisan Morcha. We'll leave it there for now. We'll hope to get all of you back when Mr. Ghanwat can actually also take part in the debate. Thanking you all for now. Avik, Sandip, and Smita, thank you so much, and to our audience, see you tomorrow. Goodbye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.